Hi, what are the tassels that Jesus spoke about? They are far, far more than just some pieces of cloth that Jewish men wear. Learn the biblical significance and see how David had to deal with tassels and what amazing miracle that Jesus performed with his tassels and how this is really fulfilled prophecy. You're going to be amazed. Watch till the end and I'll share how the Jewish people actually interpreted the tassels. Religious Jewish men still wear them, by the way. In Numbers 15 verse 37 through 40, God commanded the children of Israel to make tassels on the fringes of their garments. The purpose for these tassels was for them to remember to obey all of the commandments in the Torah. The Torah is also called the Pentateuch and stands for the first 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It contains 613 commandments and of course a lot of introductory teachings. For instance, in the Torah, you can find the creation, how God made marriage, the purpose and the roles in marriage. You can find out how the governments were formed. Many of the basics of society were there. In Deuteronomy 22 verse 12, it tells us that the tassels are to be put on the 4 corners of our garment. Let me go over a couple of important details, but stay with me. It's going to be very exciting. The tassels are called Tsitsits in Hebrew, also Tsitsits. Now the word corner, where the tassel hangs from, is actually a very interesting word. It's kanaf and can mean 2 things: corner or wing, like of a bird. The Greek word is kraspadon. Now this can shed some real insights into the scriptures. Do you remember when David was in hiding from King Saul and King Saul was pursuing him? There was a point where David easily could have killed King Saul while King Saul was resting. But David just cut off the corner of his robe. 1 Samuel 24 verse 11 uses the word kanaf. But what does that mean? Well, wearing tassels means that you've put yourself under the authority of the Torah. By doing this, David was actually not just cutting off some piece of clothing to prove that he was stronger or he could have killed him. By all intents and purposes, David was telling Saul that Saul was not operating under the authority of the Torah. Then in Malachi 4 verse 2, it uses the word kanaf again, but the translators decided to translate it into wing. But the original readers were Hebrews, so they could easily have read this as the corners where the tassels are. It says that the healing is in his kanaf. It's talking about the Messiah. So now let's look at Luke 8 verse 45. It's written in Greek. It talks about a woman who for 12 years had an issue with bleeding. She went up to Jesus and touched the border, or in the Greek kraspadon, of his garment and was healed. Why would she do this? Well, she probably had read Malachi 4 verse 2. So Jesus said in verse 48, "Your faith has healed you." What did she believe based on Malachi 4 verse 2? That Jesus was the Messiah. In Matthew 14 verse 36, a lot of people came to Jesus to be healed by touching the hem or corner kraspadon of his garment. So, now at the end, I told you I would share some details how the tassels were made. Okay, so here you actually have one. Notice it has 5 knots. This represents the 5 books of the Torah. Then there are 4 spaces between the 5 knots. Each space represents 1 letter of the name of God called JHWH, JHWH. Now, what I'm going to tell you now is going to make more sense for the Hebrew culture, not so much for the English culture. But in Hebrew, every letter has a numerical value associated with it. So there are 8 threads between the knots. Now in the Shema, or Deuteronomy 6 verse 4, watch this video for that. It tells us that there is only one God. The word for one here is echad. If you add up the numbers associated with the letters, you come up with 13. Now, if you add up the letters for the Hebrew word of tassels, tsitsits, you would come up with 600. So you add 600 plus 13. You come up with 613. Now, that was a lot of math. But what does the number 613 represent? There are 613 commandments in the Torah. Amazing, isn't it? I know that this is not Western thinking at all. And even though I was a math teacher, I personally don't tend to think like that. But you have to admit, it is amazing. So you come up to a conclusion yourself on this. And God bless you. Bye-bye.